When doing storytelling and literacy work with young people who have multiple disabilities and/or visual impairment, we have to work a little harder to bring the story to life for that young person. They might not be able to see the story print or the images in the book, so we have to try a little harder to represent imaginary concepts, items that aren't in the real world next to that young person. We would bring into play all their senses in the best cases to actually allow that young person to experience as fully as possible the reality of that story. A very simple way to make any story multisensory is to add in other materials and create a small basic kit to get you started. For example, this story is called The Magnetic Banana. This is about two schoolboys learning about science, learning about magnetism and having some frolics on the way. To make the story come to life, we add in some real magnets so pupils who are not familiar with this concept can try feeling, disconnecting, feel the force of the magnets. Additionally, you can have elements that do appear in the story. In this story, a worm is made magnetic so pupils can feel a worm-shaped object, in this case a snake. And you can add in additional elements to further demonstrate aspects of the story. Here we have some metal spoons, there is a scene in a kitchen, so the fun and nonsense that the boys would have with being magnetic there. You can add in additional materials as your pupil group needs or when available. For example, to add relevance to this story, a fresh banana can be around for pupils to feel, have a tactile experience, to smell, hear the peeling, and also, if possible, taste. An example of a typical sensory story we would use in school would be a box, perhaps as many boxes as you require, depending upon the scale of the story. This story, The Genie and the Lamp, is an experience of the Orient, Far East and adventure, so there are many opportunities for multisensory experience. It's an in-house story, so not from a printed text. We have the story with a guide to staff, what should occur in the story and which objects they can employ while they're telling it at which stage. For example, fabrics and textures, these can be used for light stimulation with reflection, moved into the pupil's field of vision, or can just be used as a textural and tactile element that the pupil can feel to experience something different. Also, objects that occur in the story that might be from other cultures or other experiences to add further dimensions for the pupil. This one has a lot of sensory element in terms of smell, so we'd have a lot of stimulation of smell. This is dried oranges to have a good aromatic scent, and we have pots of different spices. This would have a further learning element in that all pupils would tend to learn home economics in school and cooking skills, so an experience of this would supplement that curriculum area also. Obviously, stories on this scale can grow very large and become very muddled, so in a school setting it's very important to keep these organised so staff know what is in the box, how to run the story and can identify any missing items. We would keep stories organised by having a key card in the box. An example of a sensory story that can work very well is where you don't just have a fictional story but also merge into non-fiction and real-world learning for other curriculum areas. This story is A Footballer Called Flip, a funny story about a children's football team. We have the book in standard format, we have the book in large print format. In addition, this box contains a Braille version of the story, so young people who are Braille readers can follow along as well, the whole group accessing equally. The objects in a box like this are selected to demonstrate aspects of the story, but also to give the young people who are listening to the story a real experience of the topic and the objects at hand. This box would contain football shin pads and football boots, because young people who are visually impaired may not have played football, they may not have played using traditional football equipment. They would have their own version of the game. There would also be paraphernalia associated with football and going to football games, some more objects that you may use when playing the game, and also an actual football. In this case, a football such as the young people would use in PE activities with the auditory element. So this is a familiar object from another curriculum area, adding more rounded learning to the experience. When making sensory stories, the 5 key points to remember are: the stories need to be multi-sensory as far as possible, stimulate as many senses, make use of any residual vision that the young person has, using light, using positioning of objects, so it's a full rounded experience. The second most important point is that the objects should, as far as possible, be real world objects. Things should look and feel and be as far to scale as possible. The next most important point is to remember you don't have to stick rigidly to a script or book text. It's best actually to adapt that to the young person in question. So change the vocabulary, scale it up, simplify it, and work with that young person's comprehension. Create and resource your stories collaboratively across your school, across various classes, departments and the organisation, and then share your stories once they're made so more young people can benefit. Organisation of stories is key, so boxes need to be tidy, have a list in there with everything that should be in the box, and also indicate which senses will be stimulated.